Good evening, everyone. It's getting to be 5 p.m. now, and you all are welcome to the next series of NPCCHH webinar. And as you know, we started this webinar series some time back so that we could invite eminent speakers and introduce them to the program officers of the National Program on Climate Change and Human Health. So today's program is related to the discussion on climate change, vulnerability in agriculture, and the impact it has on malnutrition and in child malnutrition in specific. We will be discussing this today, and with us we have a prominent speaker, Dr. Bidhubhusan Mahapatra. Dr. Bidhubhusan Mahapatra, you are welcome to the show today on this webinar series. And Dr. Mahapatra is from the Population Council of India Habitat Center, situated in India Habitat Center. Dr. Mahapatra has worked in the Population Council, New Delhi. He is the co-lead of the Council's Population, Environmental Risk and Climate Crisis, that is PERCC initiative. In this role, Dr. Mahapatra provides strategic input to climate change work across council offices and undertakes research on examining the effects of air pollution and climate change on public health. Before joining Population Council, Dr. Mahapatra worked with the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, working across Hindu Kush Himalayan countries on various environmental issues. Mahapatra has published over 58 peer-reviewed papers in various journals and participated at numerous international conferences to present findings from his research. He serves as the academic editor of PLOS One and PLOS Climate. Dr. Mahapatra has a doctorate in population studies from International Institute of Population Sciences, International Institute of Population Sciences Institute, and a master's degree in statistics from Sambalpur University. Dr. Mahapatra has, along with his team, published in PLOS One. I repeat, in PLOS One, which is one of a very highly regarded journal internationally of quality research, a research article, an original research article called Vulnerability of Agriculture to Climate Change Increases the Risk of Child Malnutrition, Evidence from a Large-Scale Observational Study in India. Now, friends, while we are working in this program, in the last couple of years, you all are familiar with how this program has been important to understand and establish what we need to do in context of establishing services, climate change services, which are relevant in context of health for our population. And I think nutrition and food security are two areas which have always been of importance, and we have also identified certain centers of excellence in the country who've been working with us in these areas. Today, I would like to ask Dr. Mahapatra to briefly take us through his findings in this paper, and then we'll have a short interaction after his presentation. So Dr. Mahapatra, please, over to you.
Thank you, sir, for such a nice introduction. So with me, my colleague, Dr. Niranjan Sagurti is here. So if in between the presentation or during the discussion, he will also join me and then participate in the discussion also. So with that, let me share my screen. Can you all see my presentation? Can you all see? Okay, thank you. So it is a real privilege to present the findings of this paper, and let me tell you that I will not be only presenting the paper that was published in the PLOS ONE journal, but also further analysis that we have done. So I have added those components into this presentation also, so that it gives a more coherent story on what work this actually exemplifies. So just a brief introduction before I go into the topic about the PERC. So the PERC initiative is a initiative that was launched by the Population Council to investigate the complex interactions and dynamics between people and their environment, and helps to ensure that climate programs and policies are progressive, inclusive, and rooted in their principles of equity. And we work on three core focus areas. One is on gender equality and adolescent health and well-being. The second component is harmonized demographic and climate modeling, as part of which we have developed something called community demographic modeling, which helps to conduct projections of different demographic indicators, assuming different climate change scenarios up to subdivision level kind of thing. And then the final one is the sustainable livelihoods for economic empowerment, where we examine more on the livelihood diversification, nutrition, and many more urbanization issues. With that, this is a very learned audience, so I need not tell about why climate change affects food security or the nutrition, but just to give a snapshot of how is the conceptual framework. It's basically that when there is climate change happens, then the erratic climate events will increase, which will ultimately impact the agriculture production, mostly in both quantity and quality. And then comes the inequalities and insecurities in water, food, and financial capabilities. And that would lead to basically the inadequate food consumption and simultaneously increase incidence of diseases because of the different climatic events. And ultimately, as a result of this, what we'll see is the malnutrition, not only among children, but across the society that we'll see. And then there will be diet-related non-communicable diseases. This is the hypothesis that we have been seeing. Now, if there is if there is no climate change and every socioeconomic inequalities, everything disappeared, then every child should have been equally growing. There should not be any disparity. However, you still see there is disparity, and even after you let's say you control for all those socioeconomic inequalities, but still there are evidences that you can see the differentials in growth, which means that there are environmental and climatic factors which affects their growth. Now, why that happens? So with that questions, we started investigating that can we check something that actually says vulnerability of climate change on nutrition? Can we test that? So we started looking at the literature, and we found several papers which suggested that, okay, whenever there is climate change vulnerability to agriculture, the food security definitely hampers. Now, having known that, now it went a step further and assessed, okay, let's say that whether there has been any association of the degree of vulnerability in agriculture to climate change, and whether that has been any effect on their child nutrition or not. And then, okay, let's say there is some relationship, but are they spatially correlated? If it is some correlation that you see based on the statistical analysis, but is there anything special effects? And if there is special effect, then are there any geographical hotspots where the program and policies can prioritize to reduce the child malnutrition? So I will briefly go into the methodology, the two data sources that we used for the vulnerability of agriculture to climate change. This is something we did not do originally, but what we did, along with our co-authors from ICAR who had actually developed an index with support from ICAR. So we took those index where they had taken 38 indicators to develop a vulnerability index. So we took the same 38 indicators, took the ranking they had given. The only thing that we differentiated that they did it for the 2001 census districts. So we had to extrapolate it to the 2011 number of districts. As our the other data set that we used on the for the child nutrition was NFHS 4. Which was based on the 2011 census districts. So after doing that extrapolation, we merged at the district level, the vulnerability index and the child nutrition data. And the NFHS 4 that we used was 2015-16 round that we used, and it covered more than nearly 7 lakh women from where the data was collected. And for the specifically for the child nutrition data, nearly 2.5 lakh children were measured for the stunting, wasting, and underweight, and then nearly 2 lakh children were measured from the 6 to 59 months for the anemia. So before we go into, so these are the levels at the India level. So 39% were found to be stunting, then 1/5 about on wasting, and again 36% and 59% on underweight and anemia levels. So the first questions let's answer. Is there an association between the degree of vulnerability in climate change and child nutrition? So the first picture which shows on your left side is the degree of vulnerability map that we have created. And the right hand side shows the stunting level. And the stunting level, what we have done, we have divided into different quintiles. So you can see the red ones are the very the pinkish one. They actually shows very high level of stunting. So particularly on the right hand side, you see it's the particularly the Bihar and all those areas where there is clustering up, there is so much of stunting. However, when you see the vulnerability map, it's the western part and part of the western also eastern northeastern part, that also you see at the highly vulnerable kind of thing. Now, when we looked at this relationship at the macro, micro level, analyzing, linking the individual characteristics and imposing the vulnerability index and fit a more statistical modeling kind of thing, we found that after adjusting for several socioeconomic inequalities and socio-demographic characteristics, the children who were residing in the districts with very high degree of vulnerability were almost 32% more likely to have stunting than those residing in low vulnerability districts. Similarly, when we move to wasting, again, it's a mix. Now it's not in Bihar, but if you see in the central and western part, there is a higher prevalence of wasting. But when you again do the statistical modeling, what we found is that children who are in very high degree of vulnerability districts, it's almost 42% more likely to have wasting than those who are residing in low vulnerability districts. Same, in underweight also, and underweight and then anemia, where we found that anemia, particularly that if you are residing in a very high vulnerability districts, then the likelihood goes up as high as 75% than if you are residing in a low vulnerability districts. Now, having known that, remember that those analyses were done in NFHS 4 and 2015-16. So what we did for this presentation, we also went back and checked with the recently released NFHS 5 districts and have the pattern changed and do they remain same? And the pattern almost remains same. Like for stunting, if you see again, there is a clustering on the eastern part of India, and westing again the western and the central belt. So the pattern almost remains same. But whether the with the vulnerability index, whether there has been change. The only thing what we did here, given that the other the vulnerability in the index that we used in paper, that was quite old. So we recently, there was another vulnerability index provided by the IIT with support from DST. So we used that particular vulnerability index to see whether the relationship still exists. And the relationship still suggests that, as the degree of vulnerability increases, then the child malnutrition also increases. So this actually validates the earlier analysis that we had done in the paper. So even with the new data, we get the similar kind of analysis. Now, that is one question that we answered, but we again thought, okay, it is likely that these associations are all random and they can be aberrations. So we took another step ahead and then looked for, can we check with the vegetation covers, okay, and whether they have any relationship with the child malnutrition. And why we took vegetation cover? Many research have shown that the surrounding area, if there is a consistent greenery, if there is greenery, that indicates that there is good cropping pattern in those areas, there is good agriculture, there is food production. And that's why the children are not likely to go in hunger, and that's why there will be more nutrition. So that was the hypothesis. And when we did this analysis, what we did, we took the only took the rural PSUs and took the satellite image provided by the Moody's satellite using the Google Earth engine, and then looked at the stunting level for PSU and then the vegetation in that area. So we took around 5 kilometer buffer area for each clusters to see what kind of greenery or the vegetation occurring in those areas and whether there has been any effect. So what we found is that when the intensity of vegetation in the 12 months increases, so the more the greenery, the stunting rates come down significantly. So similarly wasting, underweight, and anemia. So the more the greenery, the less the malnutrition. However, then we checked, okay, it's good that with the greenery, the vegetation increases, but let's say in a year, it is not possible that every time the greenery will be same. So we looked at the variation over the 12 months period. If there is a variations, how does that impact the nutrition? And surprising and very interestingly, we found that when the there is very high level of variations in the greenery kind of thing. So let's say in particular 2-3 months there is high level of vegetation, and then again in the summer season there is no greenery, then the malnutrition actually increases. Significantly increases. So that clearly tells that areas where there is no consistent regular food production, the malnutrition occurs in those areas. That indicates kind of thing. And this analysis was specifically focused only on the rural areas, given the greenery can be a concept that is more relevant to the rural area rather than to the urban area. Now coming to the second question, is there any special effect of climate vulnerability on child nutrition? All the association that we earlier saw, it was all basically, kind of two separate images. So before going to, that examining those relationships, we also checked whether there has been any special correlation. So whether that, suppose let's say district A, whether the district A nutrition is actually dependent or somehow related to the neighboring district's nutritional status or also. And it clearly shows that there is a very high level of clustering. So if you go to one district where there is some level, high level of stunting, it is likely that the surrounding districts will have similar kind of pattern. And same with, if you go to a district with very low level of stunting, then the surrounding areas will also likely to have low level of stunting. So what it shows when you go to the stressor relationship in between. So the left hand side is shows a spatial analysis map, which shows the what is the spatial correlation between the climate vulnerability, the vulnerability of agriculture to climate change, and stunting. What it clearly shows, there has been around 79 districts where they both the neighboring, and there is a very good amount of spatial correlation. On the right hand side, what I saw is the districts where there is very high burden of stunting. When I say high burden of stunting means it is above the India level average. And then districts where the climate vulnerabilities are high or very high. What is such a very good comparison of that? See, particularly in some of those areas where the reds are highlighted, they are actually also the very high vulnerability, high vulnerable, high burden malnutrition districts also. Now, the benefit of the special analysis that we found is that whether those, as I said, whether the climate vulnerability, it affects only the one particular districts, or it also affects the neighboring districts also. We found very interesting findings that there is a spillover effect. It's very less, definitely, but there has been some spillover effect. So it not only affects the children within those residing in the districts, but also it goes over, spills over to the other districts' children also. So even if the other districts may not have a very good, what you say, less vulnerable, but there some effect will also be there in those districts because of the neighboring districts, and that could be particularly in those neighboring regions. Same similar thing we found for the westing, where again you see the western part is particularly in the west in the both maps shows very high to high correlation, at least 75 districts where there is high correlation. And in terms of the total effect, almost 6% high and very high, they contribute as compared to those who are very low or low. If you are residing in a very high vulnerable districts, then your likelihood of getting wasting increases by 6 percentage point. Same with the underweight, again very highly correlated, almost 92 districts, and with 9% of the total effect coming, most of which are again direct effects. Again with anemia, 65 districts had very highly correlation, and a little bit of differences here. If you see that here the correlation, the spatial clustering is very low. If you look at the green colored maps and the red maps, it is not that very highly linked. However, for underweight, stunting, and wasting, there was a very good one-to-one correspondence. However, for anemia, the correspondence is not that much. And this could be because that anemia may not be a very direct reflection of the climate change vulnerability, the indicators that we are taking, or it could have been that some of the spillovers that we are seeing, they may be on the boundary lines, so the correlations may not be actually capturing those boundaries, kind of thing. However, and this is what I was mentioning, that because the spillovers are not so clear, so 10% of the effects, out of which almost 98% or 99% is actually are direct effect, kind of thing. Now, which are the geographical? So we did all those analysis, but as a programmer, where do I go and implement my program? Looked at identified. I will not go into each of those districts where we identified, but few things emerged clearly. One thing is that when we created, again, among the high and very high vulnerable districts, which are the districts where actually there are any malnutrition? It comes to 170 districts. That's too many. We further went down and say, okay, where all the malnutrition occurs, and it's only 69 districts. Now, if we look at these 69 districts more closely, what it actually shows is that these districts are, districts which have both historically, if you see, they have poor health infrastructure, low literacy, rudimentary sanitation, and poverty. And more specifically, when you will look at those districts, what is required is that more micro level planning, because within the districts, there are heterogeneity more at the rural areas, more at the sub-districts level. So those heterogeneities has to be explored. So in summary, what these findings brings out that definitely, there has been an association and the special correlation that shows that districts which are highly vulnerable to climate change, particularly in agriculture, the likelihood of children getting malnutrition is also higher in those districts. Second thing that we learned is that just going by looking at the maps and targeting a program may not always be correct. Rather, also look at the special correlation to see that where there is a clustering and only not implementing program in one district where the vulnerability there, but also target those neighboring areas also where there can be vulnerability, the likelihood of getting malnutrition is higher among those also. The third thing we learned in this analysis is that while vulnerability to agriculture and it's something that can be addressed with technological innovations and planning better cropping systems, what is also required is the more cluster-specific agricultural plans, where you need to go down further to the sub-district or panchayat level, assess, use the satellite images, assess their climate patterns, and do more micro-planning to develop a plan where they do climate resilient cropping systems so that the nutrition crisis can be dealt with. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mahapatra. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. And I will try for my program officers to summarize few of the things that I understood, maybe in a language that is less scientific to them. Is I think that the first important findings that you suggested from this paper is that your analysis found that the odds, or I can say the probability of a child to be stunted, a child to be wasted, to be underweight, or to be anemic is going to increase substantially to a tune of 30 to 60% depending upon what parameter you chose. If they belong to district which had climate change vulnerability on agriculture. I think that's what I can say in a simple language for them, with lesser for stunting and more for anemic, but different percentage, definitely 30 and above. Now, in our understanding of public health, we all here in this forum know that stunting is a marker of chronic malnutrition. And therefore, stunting is always a characteristic which tells us not about the child, but about the chronic deprivation of nutrition across generations, right? So, therefore, you get only around 30% or something for stunting because it takes time for it to establish generation after generation before stunting starts happening. So, malnourished in parents and grandparents may have resulted in stunting. And then on the contrary, anemia and underweight are more recent things that may happen in one generation. So you get more percentage of finding there. So your very characteristic finding in your paper is that a long term of vulnerability जो experience हुआ है climate change का impact agriculture में होने की वजह से, जिससे food security has taken up, food security has been challenged, which has resulted in this pattern of parameters of malnutrition. And दूसरा जो बात मुझे समझ आई got from your paper is that between low vulnerability or very low vulnerability district against very high vulnerability district में कम से कम एवरेज 5% का फर्क होने की संभावना है। कहने का मतलब ये हुआ कि अगर आपके पास एक ऐसी डिस्ट्रिक्ट है जिसकी वल्नरेबिलिटी बहुत ज्यादा है, तो बहुत कम वल्नरेबिलिटी वाले डिस्ट्रिक्ट के मुकाबले 5 से 10% का वेरिएशन दिखेगा। ये मुझे समझ आया आपके कहने पे। सेकंड की तीसरी चीज जो मुझे समझ आई वो ये थी कि लगभग ऐसे 70 डिस्ट्रिक्ट हैं जिनको कि आपने बहुत क्लोजली एनालाइज किया, और आपने ये पाया कि ये वो डिस्ट्रिक्ट हैं जो किसी सेंस में ना केवल एग्रीकल्चर पर बहुत और भी पैरामीटर्स पे उनकी डेवलपमेंट नहीं रही है। तो ये दर्शाता है कि एक जो जनरल डेवलपमेंट के जो इंडेक्स होते हैं वो एक बहुत क्लोजली एक दूसरे से रिलेटेड होते हैं, और इसलिए जो डिस्ट्रिक्ट पीछे रह जाते हैं वो बहुत से पैरामीटर्स में एक साथ पीछे हो जाते हैं, एंड उनकी एक इम्पैक्ट हेल्थ पे रह जाती है, एक जनरेशन में नहीं, कई जनरेशन में आने वाले टाइम पे। एक चीज जो आपकी फाइंडिंग में मैंने और आपके प्रेजेंटेशन में देखा वो ये समझा कि सिर्फ उसी जिले में असर नहीं होता, मतलब अगर किसी डिस्ट्रिक्ट में लेवल ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर का फूड सिक्योरिटी का प्रॉब्लम देखा गया तो वो दूसरे नेबरिंग डिस्ट्रिक्ट पे भी उसका स्पिल ओवर हुआ। इसका मतलब कि आजू बाजू के जिले भी उसका वो नेचुरल में समझ रहे हैं क्लस्टरिंग इफेक्ट जैसा आपने बताया उसका एक इम्पैक्ट है। आपने ये भी बताया कि एक वेजिटेशन कवर के साथ आपने एक एनालिसिस करी अपना सैटेलाइट का पैरामीटर को देखते हुए, जहां हरियाली ज्यादा दिखी वहां कुपोषण कम था, जहां हरियाली कम दिखी वहां कुपोषण ज्यादा था। तो ये सारी बातें हमारे ऑफिसर्स के लिए एक संदेश देती हैं, दिस गिव्स अ मैसेज टू माय प्रोग्राम ऑफिसर्स हाउ इट इज नॉट अ थ्योरेटिकल मैटर। आपने इंडिया में ये स्टडी किया और इंडिया के बहुत हाल के NFHS के बारे के डेटा उठाते हुए, जिसके कि हमारे सारे प्रोग्राम ऑफिसर सालों से परिचित हैं, NFHS कितना अच्छा डेटाबेस बनाता है, उसके डेटाबेस को आपने जो एग्रीकल्चर का वल्नरेबिलिटी इंडेक्स बनाया उसके साथ में एनालाइज किया और उनको ये बताया कि आपके काम और NFHS के काम को अगर एक के ऊपर एक ओवरले करें तो बहुत क्लियरली पता चलता है कि जहां जहां वल्नरेबिलिटी है वहीं वहीं कुपोषण है। दैट इज अ वेरी रिमार्केबल वर्क जो आपने किया है। और एक और बात जो हमारे ऑफिसर्स हम बात करते हैं, क्योंकि हम लोग बेसिकली मेडिकल बैकग्राउंड से हैं, तो वल्नरेबिलिटी पे बड़े परेशान होते हैं। तो आज आपने एक स्लाइड दिखाई जिसमें आपने हमें 3 तरह के पैरामीटर्स से परिचित कराया। एक सेंसिटिविटी का आपका पैरामीटर था, एक एक्सपोजर का पैरामीटर था और एक अडेप्टिव कैपेसिटी का पैरामीटर था। कुछ दिन पहले आपसे पहले हमारे एक गेस्ट इसी तरीके से क्लाइमेट चेंज की वल्नरेबिलिटी पे बात कर रहे थे और वहां भी उन्होंने इसी तरह से 3 ग्रुप ऑफ पैरामीटर्स दिखाए और एक मैथमेटिक्स का फॉर्मूला दिखाया जिससे कि इंडेक्स कैलकुलेट होता है। तो मेरे ख्याल में वही चीज आपने दूसरे तरीके से एग्रीकल्चर के इम्पैक्ट में क्लाइमेट चेंज के साथ दिखाया है। तो मेरे अफसरों को ये मैसेज जाता है कि देखिए वल्नरेबिलिटी इन 3 तरह के वेरिएबल्स से बनता है, चाहे आप उनमें से कोई भी अपने सेलेक्ट करें जो आपके लिए सूटेबल है, पर उसमें एक ग्रुप ऑफ वेरिएबल होना चाहिए जो सेंसिटिविटी दर्शाता है, एक जो एक्सपोजर का, जैसे आपके यहाँ पे रेनफॉल वगैरह टेम्परेचर ये आपके एक्सपोजर के डेटा बता रहे थे। सेंसिटिविटी में आपने वहाँ का सॉइल कैसा है और वहाँ के उन वेदर इम्पैक्ट्स का उनके एग्रीकल्चर पे क्या सिचुएशन है उस पर बताया। और अडेप्टिव कैपेसिटी में आपने पॉपुलेशन, जेंडर, ये सब चीजें बताएं। तो ये सब तरह का जो मिक्स ऑफ वेरिएबल्स है इससे वल्नरेबिलिटी इंडेक्स का बताया। तो मेरे ख्याल में बहुत अच्छा रहा आपका ये प्रेजेंटेशन और इससे हमारी एक इम्पॉर्टेंट सीख मिली। आप को हम ये बताना चाहेंगे कि हम एक सेकंड इससे पहले कि मैं इस चीज में आगे बढ़ूं, मैं अपने अफसरों से रिक्वेस्ट करता हूं कि अगर किसी के पास कोई सवाल हो तो कृपया चैट बॉक्स में मुझे लिख करके भेजें ताकि मैं डॉक्टर महापात्रा जी से पूछ सकूं। और जब तक आपके सवाल आते हैं मैं उनसे एक सवाल पूछना चाहूंगा कि ये पूरा समझने के बाद आपने जो काम किया और आपकी काम की समझ बनी, हम वो ऑफिसर हैं जिनकी पोस्टिंग इस पर्पस से हुई है कि हम सर्विसेज को डिजाइन करें ताकि हमारे पॉपुलेशन का जो हेल्थ है वो क्लाइमेट चेंज के इम्पैक्ट से प्रोटेक्टेड रह सके। इसलिए हम जो मेरे साथ आज स्टेट और डिस्ट्रिक्ट के ऑफिसर्स who have joined with me, what is your message to us as program officers, those who are working in area of designing health services which will protect the health of our population against climate change? What would be your recommendations to us based on your lifetime work in this area? Please.
Very good, Nayak. So, irrespective of this nutrition-related work, what I feel, particularly in the climate change and health sector, what I feel in India is that we do not have certain specific indicators that actually measures the resilient health structure, health system. So, if NPCCHH can actually come up with a framework that actually helps to, give a framework, okay, that actually helps to measure how our health system is, how climate resilient, that would be a very good way to go forward. Coming to specifically on nutrition, honestly, I do not have idea how closely you work with the ICDS and other system, and then maybe that is another way to go forward, that you work with other health programs so that and bring a lens of the climate change vulnerability into that, so that there has been comprehensive holistic approach to other programs also. And I invite my colleague also if he has any suggestion. Dr. Niranjan.
Yes, please.
Yeah, no, I think you said that all. I mean, from a services perspective, it's the one of the key thing that's emerging from the research and also the data is that micro planning for implementation of the services that are required. For example, although the research had highlighted the fact that the districts that are vulnerable for agriculture due to climate change are also the districts that are vulnerable with high malnutrition. However, within the districts, there are also lots of variations in terms of the equity that exists in terms of that vulnerability to agriculture, and also equity that exists on the nutrition element. So if there is, if the program officers are actually working at the district level, could consult and have a consultative meeting of the health systems, the ICT, ICDS, on the nutrition department, and also the other departments to come together and identify those geographies that are particularly vulnerable from the perspective of the climate change and health, and design the appropriate action plan. That not even an immediate action plan is to address the health issue per se in that sub-district geographies. However, the longer term plan is to, as Bidhu said, making the systems resilient and also that the individuals have that resilience to the climate change that is happening and adaptive to the agriculture that suits the climate change. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Niranjan and Dr. Mahapatra. I will like to tell my officers also. We are in the process of designing an action plan on how this program will address the issues of impact of food security and nutritional issues. We are working with two prominent institutions. One is the Nutrition Foundation of India, which will probably be providing us a roadmap of how to address the food security issues, and the another is the National Institute of Nutrition, which will be giving us a roadmap of how to address nutrition issues. They are at the moment working on those action plans, and then we'll be asking the states. First draft of their action plan is now already available on our website, and we have asked all our state officers to start drafting their state level plan based on those plans. And then once the state officers share their plan, this institute will provide good feedback to the states and improve their plans. In general, at least the basics, at least that I think our program can do in this regard to our program is, number one, at least raise awareness about this issue. That is the foremost, I think, important. And we have a component of raising awareness. All our district program officers are committed to raise awareness about these issues, including nutritional issues in climate change impact. And the second area where this program is trying to make an impact is by undertake training of health professionals and health workers more elaborately, so that they can understand the fine nuances of nutrition, fine nuances of climate change, and how they interact. The third area that is under progress is we've already been working on surveillance of certain health outcomes of climate change. Nutrition is definitely a health outcome, and nutrition surveillance is a part which is being undertaken in this country in different contexts. So we also have an idea that we will probably undertaking climate change related nutrition surveillance in the country in times to come. That will probably give an ongoing data collection to make our population and health program officials to be aware of how things are changing with time. And then based on how the suggestions will come from these centers of excellence, we will design on how the response mechanism will be. It is definitely a program of intersectoral coordination. ICDS and other programs which address issues of nutrition will very much be a part of it. At the ground level, we have also plans that we work with ASHAs, which are the root level workers in health program, and to involve Anganwadi workers simultaneously from ICDS program at the root level district. But as more feedbacks come from experts, we will also invite your organization to be a part of what we call the technical expert group, which gives support to us in form of technical advice on the subject related matters. And I think my program officers will in times to come be able to do a good job in their districts. But your presentation today had a very important role in at least telling how your own original work suggests that there is a concrete evidence to the fact that in India, that nutrition is an impact, this malnutrition is an impact of climate change and related food security issues, and why it is time to understand that it is one of a major factor that we need to address. So with that, I look once again, I don't have any questions on the chat box. So I think I will request to share please your presentation so that we will circulate to our officers. And with that, once again, thank you, both of you and your team for being with us on behalf of my program officers. And thank you to my program officers for being with us in this webinar series. We will also be sharing the record on the program YouTube channel, and all of you can have an opportunity if you have missed it. Thank you once again, and with this, good evening.
Thank you, sir, for giving us this opportunity, and we'll be happy to associate with NPCCHH and going forward in participating in these discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. In fact, we work very closely with Dr. Prema Ramchandran from NFI and also NIN. You might know that there is this comprehensive national nutrition survey that we did across the country. which had captured a lot of the valuable information on various nutrition indicators. And this analysis and the data and the evidence will continue to come. And this is an important area of work. As you said, sir, that the awareness, raising awareness is the immediate first step on how the climate change affects the food security and the nutrition. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.